Thank you, Veronica. I'm Betsy Berkhemer-Credaire. How nice to see you all this morning, and my panel guests here, and bright and beautiful. And wouldn't you agree that we want Veronica's skirt? Yes. Where did you get that? It is fantastic. Rent the runway. Yes, yes. I think it would go with everything we're wearing, right? So, thank you. Well, I'm delighted to say good morning and thank Desiree for inviting us here, and all of you fantastic real estate investors, property owners, business builders. And as you can tell, we welcome the men in the room as well, but we women are talking to you women about pathways to get onto corporate boards and other boards along the way in order to build your reputation. I happen to, as Veronica said, I've owned a executive search firm, retained executive search firm here in Los Angeles for the last 25 years. I know. And I did a few things before that, too. And I'm going to do a few things more. And a year and a half ago, I took on the role of being the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards, which is a national campaign that Desiree is part of, a campaign to advance and accelerate women getting on corporate boards. Now that means public company boards, private company boards, real estate company boards, our REITs, whom many of you deal with all the time, getting on their boards in order to advance your career and enjoy the benefits of being on boards that men have enjoyed for years, decades. And we just didn't know about these potentials for our career, and frankly, and forgive us men in the room, they didn't want us to know. They didn't want those pesky women on their boards. So, but we're in force now. We're in moving forward with great purpose, and for the benefit not only of the women who will serve on boards, but for the companies that they serve on, and for the population of women. And how they're treated at the workplace. And companies are also more profitable and more productive when women serve with men on the corporate boards. So I have also one other thing to add that I'll tell you more about in a minute, and that is our new law in California. It's called SB 826, and Terry and I were very active in getting that law passed. Total amateurs. We were just up in Sacramento fighting for this all last year, and we started the whole effort 7 years ago. So it's very exciting, and it is the first state in the nation to ever have a law requiring at least one woman on every public company board this year, and two more, a total of 3 on every public company board in California, a total of 3 by the end of 2021. And yes. Oh, we're so proud. It's the achievement of our lives. And it was the sponsorship and energy of the National Association of Women Business Owners, NAWBO, N-A-W-B-O. We often get mixed up with NAWRB, NAWBO, California. We have 11 chapters of women business owners in California. So very proud of this, and it will affect your lives in many ways, and hopefully some of you will also navigate your careers after hearing us today to get yourselves onto corporate boards. So I have women, 2 experienced corporate board members here, Terry Bazemore and Terry Bayer. Not all women corporate directors have to be named Terry, but these 2 are. Right? And so, and Scharrell Jackson next to me, who has enlightened and encouraged so many women about their career pathways and how to get onto corporate boards. So I'll turn the mic to Scharrell first, and then we will interview our 2 board members about their stories. So Scharrell, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Betsy. I'm Scharrell Jackson. I am the COO, CFO, and partner of Squar Milner. We're a regional CPA firm headquartered in Irvine, California. I'm also the founder and CEO of Leadership in Heels, a women's speaker series I started back in 2015 for women by women for the sole purpose of making a difference in a woman's life. I sit on a number of boards. I sit on the Center for Investment Wealth for UCI on their board. I sit on the Center for Leadership board for Cal State University of Fullerton. I sit on the President's Advisory Board for Concordia University, and then I also sit on Big Brothers Big Sisters of Orange County and the Inland Empire and the Pacific Symphony. And I am excited about the work that is being done so that I can trudge forward to move to a corporate board and feel the obligation of both a woman and a minority. So
You're a twofer. Yes.
check. Yes.
And you have the financial background, which is
And I
excellent.
have the financial background. I've been running Squar Milner for 19 years, and prior to that, I actually started my career in real estate and construction, and then worked in manufacturing and distribution for a number of years as well. So thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, let's take the first Terry in the lavender jacket, Terry Bazemore, who's really a new resident here in Southern California. And we're so proud to have her. She moved out here from Philadelphia and left a trail of happy women along the way, I'm sure. Educated and enlightened. Terry, tell us about your story.
So good to see everyone, and happy to be here. And yes, we moved here despite the higher taxes. I think no one understands that quite. But no, I know, but we love it here. So, so I actually began my career as a lawyer. I still call myself a recovering lawyer, and knew I wanted to be involved in the business community. And so I started out doing commercial real estate development with a law firm, and then moved into mortgage banking. Although I will say, when the executive recruiter called me about a job at the Prudential, which was the third largest mortgage bank at the time, my response was, that sounds deathly boring. And she talked me into going to the first interview. And and it ended up being a wonderful career. And I think for all of us who are in the housing industry and in the mortgage banking industry, we know it actually is an interesting industry and quite demanding and challenging in terms of all of the pieces that go into making it successful. After being the general counsel of some large mortgage companies, their legal departments, I moved on to do a startup with some of my former colleagues at Prudential that we later sold. I will tell you, a lot of people did not understand that move either. They thought, when I was running the mortgage legal department for Bank of America and also responsible for some of the legal work related to other consumer products, how could you leave a job like that and move on? It was one of the best choices that I ever made, because I learned how to build and grow a business as part of that. So after we sold it, I had a few opportunities, and I decided to go with Radian, which is a private mortgage insurer and also a bond guarantor at the time. And I did that because it was being general counsel of a publicly traded company. We were doing business internationally. And so it was another way for me to build my resume. And it became a great platform for me to continue getting even better opportunities in the nonprofit sector. I've been on nonprofit boards for many, many years in many different places that I've lived. So I retired from running the mortgage insurance business, which was almost, our revenues every year were almost just under $1 billion. And I left that job in April of 2017 after running the company for about 8 years. And I was very fortunate. I landed 3 boards pretty quickly in less than a year. And I would never have imagined that. The first one was the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh. And I actually had to give that board seat up when we moved to California because I had to be an independent director living in Pennsylvania. But also, I'm on the board of Chimera Investment, which is a real estate investment trust publicly traded out of New York. And I'm on the mutual funds boards of T. Rowe Price. And I just became the chair of the audit committee. So that has been, thank you, really interesting for me because I'm now learning a whole nother industry. It's financial services, but a new industry.
That is great. That is great, Terry. And just, we'll come back to how you got to those boards. All right, Ms. Terry Bayer.
And,
Yes,
it seems
it's
to be
working,
working.
your
Very
lovely
good.
voice.
Good morning, everyone. I have a career in healthcare. I'll start out with that. And I'm going to have the joy of being on a panel later today when we talk about some of the issues related to aging. But my goal this morning on this panel is to focus on getting more women on boards. And Betsy's modest. She's our fearless CEO of 2020 Women on Boards. And that's an organization that's been around for a while, working on trying to get 20% of the boards in our country to have 20% of their seats held by women. So that's not 50, okay, that's 20. We're getting closer, and the law we have now in California is really a phenomenal opportunity for all of you in this room, and that's because there are about 180 companies that don't have a woman on their board that are publicly traded and based in California. And over the next 3 years, as more seats have to be added, we'll have 1,000 openings. So with that teaser, I'll tell you briefly how I was able to segue from really a career in healthcare to a couple of corporate board opportunities. And we're here to inspire you to translate the wonderful experience you've had thus far, either in owning your own business or being active in the ecosystem that you are around real estate, and leveraging that to really a wonderful position on a corporate board. My career in healthcare took a normal pathway. I have a master's in public health. I've worked for insurance companies, managed care organizations, smaller provider groups. And the ticket for me was just being open to people that I met. And Betsy has a very strong belief in networking for getting on corporate boards. And I'm going to tie it back to a comment we heard earlier this morning when the room is full of men, and someone said, "Where are the women?" And the answer was, "We don't know any." That's an element of truth to it when it comes to the boards. And Betsy will talk more about this, and we will in the Q&A. We have to break into the good old boy network. People get on boards because they know the CEO or they know another director, and there's a high level of trust. So for me, I happened to be working for a healthcare company. We were doing a small merger, and that board was a publicly traded company, Apria Healthcare, at that time public, now private, and they needed a director. And through our work together, she threw my name in the ring, and that was my basic entry to my first public company board. Later on, while I was working full-time in healthcare, and I think this will segue to many of you, I received a call about a board opening in the water industry. And I said, I don't know anything about water, but I worked for a company that worked in heavily regulated industry, and that applies to many of you. We have a healthcare orientation. I was in an operating position in a multi-state company, and it turned out that that was some of the background that was needed. But I had to translate, because I never thought I'd be on the board of a water utility. Now I love it. Water's very important, very, very important, increasingly so. And we need water to fight wildfires, not the least of which we need safe drinking water for living. So I've learned a tremendous amount in the last 5 years about really a new industry, and what will encourage you, and hopefully you'll leave today thinking about how you can translate your experience to other industries. We need more women in the boardroom. We bring a different style of communication, a different style of problem solving, and it's really where the future is. We have the data to show that companies who are more diverse in their directorships have better results, and I'm guessing most of you would agree with that. So in short, it's about networking, it's about finding openings, and it's about translating your career from simply, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this on a certain path, and thinking, I think as Desiree will encourage us, think across the board. Think about where those skills can transfer, and the tremendous opportunities really for all of us in California and the nation.
Wow. How do you feel now? Empowered, right? Thank you, Terry. That was well said. Definitely inspired. So, how many of you currently serve on a public company board? I really don't expect to see any hands. I just wanted to make the point. But how many of you serve on nonprofit boards? Excellent, excellent, excellent. And we all do too up here. Excellent, because serving on nonprofit boards is one of the keys to getting onto a corporate board. Now, I don't want you to think that, gee, someday I'm going to serve on the board of Nestle or General Foods or General Motors, even though General Motors now has a majority women on their boards. But all of us in this room are going to serve on the small cap company boards or even small private company boards. But we still have the same enjoyment of earning some money, additional money. Public boards pay cash compensation as well as stock. Private companies, cash compensation and some stock. Private companies, lower compensation. But like Terry just mentioned, and Terry, you learn a lot on boards. You meet very smart people, you get to know about another industry, and you become a better, well-rounded executive because you bring back that information, best practices, how other companies do things to your own company. You also, by serving on nonprofit boards, learn a lot. And I'm the author, I didn't mention yet, of this book called The Board Game, How Smart Women Become Corporate Directors, and it's available on Amazon. It's a book that profiles 85 women, 58 women, but 85% of them were recommended for their first corporate board by someone they knew on their nonprofit boards. And that's because in your sphere of networking, when we talk about networking, we're not talking just about going to cocktail parties every night and eating hors d'oeuvres, although it is a good way to make a living when you don't have any other kind of living. But especially in our business, when I was in the PR business before the search business, I did go to a lot of cocktail parties just to meet people and eat food. So, but that's not the kind of networking I'm talking about. I'm talking about being involved in nonprofit boards in your industry trade association so that you become known as a woman who gets things done, and you're seen by the other board members as a trusted comrade. And when the guys think about whom they might recommend, they want to know, like Terry said, trusted relationships, and they want to know that this woman is going to really be a good board member. Am I going to want to spend time with her in a crisis situation when there might be a time when we have to spend 2 or 3 days together, or a weekend retreat with the board, strategic retreat? Am I going to want to enjoy the time with this person? Well, if they already know them or one of the other people on the board knows them, there's a good chance that you would be recommended. So it's critical for you to start thinking in that strategic way. And Scharrell is an example of just that, because she serves on 3 nonprofit boards, Girl Scouts of Orange County and Human Options and another in Orange County. And she has leveraged those relationships very well while doing good work for the nonprofit. And something that the nonprofit also gives you is understanding, especially if you're independent practitioners, in real estate, you probably don't have your own P&L that you're responsible for. Well, companies want people who understand business, who understand business growth, who understand how to read and advance P&L. So on a nonprofit board, you get to understand what P&Ls are all about. And if you could also, I recommend, serve on a commission. Anything for the city, county, or state, and you can apply for those, where you can't apply for board positions for companies, but you can apply for county, city, or state commissions. Good friend of ours, Edith Perez, who's featured in the book, started her board pursuit. She was an attorney, general partner of a law firm, and she realized she'd retire in 5 years and she needed to map out her pathway to meet people who could put her on corporate boards. So she knew that, or hoped that being on a commission was a good pathway to get there. to meet people, the right people, and the right people who would remember her skills and her experience. And so she met people who knew the mayor. She didn't know him. She got involved, and not as a contributor to a political campaign, but just as a supporter, and was named to the Parks and Rec Commission of City of Los Angeles. And it was the lowest commission on the totem pole at the time because it was before the TV show. So she got on that. She did really well, and then she was named to the police commission by the mayor at the time. And then she was interviewed. She was in the media all the time. She was called for corporate boards before she ever retired from her law firm. So this is what I want to share with you about being on nonprofit boards, and that commissions are a good way to advance your career as well. And then turn it over to Scharrell, who will explain what she educates women about and how she herself has been greatly visible through those nonprofit boards.
Thank you. You know, the thing that I've learned is that I've worked in male-dominant industries my entire career. I started, as I stated, in real estate and construction. I moved into manufacturing and distribution, and now I run a CPA firm. So it has been male-dominated my entire career. In fact, I just attended the Major Firms Conference last week, where the top 100 firms in the world are represented there. And I was sharing at the table that when I first started attending this event, I was the only female executive as the COO of Squar and CFO of Squar. And just recently, there were 4 of us, and I was just super excited. I was looking across the room of 400 people, and I thought, oh, there's one, you know, and it was just so exciting. And, you know, the thing about it is, while we laugh, it's also very sad, because the reality of it is that we're not invited to the party. And it's so important that we do salute ourselves, and it's important that we're comfortable in recognizing our accomplishments and being able to share that, and as was stated by Terry, understanding how we can leverage our transferable skills into other businesses, whether it's on a nonprofit or a corporate board. And obviously, running a CPA male-dominated firm that I started with 19 years ago, that was $3.5 million, and growing that organization to $150 million, that's major stuff. I mean, the bottom line is, I'm a badass, and we've got to be able to. I mean, it's really true. We have got to be able to ensure that, as she was saying earlier, to gracefully share our accomplishments. And then from that, there are not many people who can say that they have actually done that. They can say that they're a part of it. But as I was sharing with my CEO the other day, we never sat down at the table and you said, well, here's what I need you to do for me. We sat down at the table, and then I made stuff happen. And as a result of that, our organization has grown and become significantly successful. And that's a major accomplishment. And that can be done whether you're in a CPA firm, you're in a real estate firm, you're in a construction firm, whether you are in healthcare industry. And so what I've been able to do as I've met people is to share the business acumens of what you bring to the table, see based on the success that you have the track record, you know what you're doing, you're qualified, you're constantly educating and re-educating yourself, and you get invited to the table. But the important part is not that you just have a seat, but that you also have a voice. And so that's something that we have to continue to work on as women.
Excellent, excellent. I definitely want you more involved in 2020 Women on Boards. Right? And so, Terry Bazemore, please tell us how you were asked to be on those boards. The first one's always the hardest, so once you get on the first one, then you're kind of male good housekeeping approved, and you have an easier time to get to the second one. But please share with us how that pathway happened.
So mine, because of the sort of condensed period, sort of all were starting to happen kind of at the same time. So normally that would be the case, right? The first one would help you get on the other ones. But I want to just reiterate a couple of things that you said, Terry, and that also that both of you were talking about. One is the whole networking piece. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but you also have to let people know that this is something you're interested in, because people won't necessarily connect the dots. So the first board that I got on was through an executive recruiter. And they got my name from someone else. That person needed to know that this was something that I would be interested in doing. And I've gotten other calls about boards. In a couple of instances, they were now conflicts with the boards I'm on, so I couldn't entertain them. But those were also from people that I knew through either businesses that I've been involved in, but they gave my name to someone who was an executive recruiter. And as companies are starting now to look for more women, the percentage of executive recruiters that are being tapped to help with those searches has increased. It's still not the majority, but it has increased because, as you said, people go, oh, I don't know any women, or I don't know, and they have to use those firms to help find a diverse slate of candidates. In the second instance with the REIT board, it was actually that the general counsel of the REIT called one of his former law partners, who had been, and is considered to be one of the top lawyers in the industry. And he gave him my name. But interestingly enough, after I spoke to him and said, yes, this is something that I would be interested in, I got a call from the chairman of the board, and his first question was, how did we find you? How did we find you? And as soon as I said how they found me, he said, oh, okay. And the whole tenor of the conversation just changed. And then it was sort of this, oh, great, would love to have you come on board, understanding that in this particular case, that board had been in place for a few years. There were no women on the board. There were no people of color on the board. So I was truly going to be a different person on this board. And in the third case, it was actually someone on the board that reached out to me who I had gotten to know because of my involvement in professional activities. Both of us had spoken at conferences about how to navigate your career in a legal setting, etc. And he reached out and said, hey, we're thinking about bringing on some more directors. And I think you would be a great person to bring on. Is this something that you would be interested in? So I can't underscore even, the importance of networking, getting involved in your industry organizations. I had been on the board of the mortgage bankers a number of times, had a lot of contacts that way. One other just quick point I want to make is think about what boards are looking for, and think about how you package your own experience in that way, and how you leverage your experience at the nonprofits. So, for instance, governance is really huge. Audit, if you can serve on the audit committee of a nonprofit. If you have now more and more companies, because of some of the issues, are looking for human resources experience around technology. There are not enough cyber experts out there. So to the extent that you can tap into some expertise there. But think about what it is the boards are looking for and the expertise they need from a governance point of view. And think about your experience and how you can build your resume to meet those needs.
Excellent points, excellent. And Terry, could you build on that, how you recommend women talk about themselves, and not just, long before the interview, but at those cocktail parties I was talking about, or business presentations. You're the one who has to start saying, I'm looking to serve on a corporate board. And then after the guy is surprised and shocked, and then you start to, you spell it out for them. So take it from there, Terry.
Sure. And then I'm going to be brief so that we can open it up to the floor and get some of your questions. Having sat through the morning presentations, particularly the last one, I'm confident that all of you are comfortable with numbers. We had more graphs and more economic trends and more percentages than I've been in most rooms where there's a group of women. So own that. Own that. It's really important. Just translate that to you can be on the Finance Committee, you can be on the Capital Investment Committee, and you can be on the Audit Committee. So if you're a CPA, you have the opportunity to chair the Audit Committee. But clearly, if you've understood what we've talked about this morning, you've got some transferable skills. So start thinking about it really in that way. And as Betsy highlighted, it's about making the decision that this is what you want to do. And you tell everyone you meet, my goal is to be on a for-profit or in a publicly traded company board or a nonprofit board or wherever you're starting. My goal is to be a director on a board by the end of the year or in the next 18 months. And again, to summarize it, you then say, and I'm ready to sit on the Finance Committee. I've got the experience, I'm ready to sit on the Compensation Committee. And if you look at your background, you begin to tell your story not the same as you've been telling it for your current career. You have operating experience, but at the board level, you want to move into setting strategy and policy and security and risk management. And again, if you understood this morning, then I'm sure most of you know about managing risk and the ups and downs of the economy. So tell your story and own it. And don't start with, it's my first board. Just say, I'm planning to join a board by the end of next year. And even if you don't have an opening on any board you're on right now, please tell people that you know that I'm ready to serve. And throw some numbers out there, because men love numbers, and I'm confident all of you can throw those numbers out there. So bring them forward one more time.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
You know, it's interesting what you were saying, because so often I think women, we minimize what we bring to the table. And I think that it's so important that we are unafraid to highlight our business accomplishments and be okay with it. I mean, it's almost awkwardly uncomfortable to salute yourself and to be able to talk about your accomplishments. I mean, it took me 53 years, I'm 53 years old, to decide to be a big girl and start saying, I'm a badass. Like, really, I second in command, and yet I'm watering down myself in order to build up someone else. So I think, to your point, it's critical that we think about that. And when you are a strategic thought leader, your value that you add to a business at a board seat is just critical. So I think it's important that we get comfortable being uncomfortable by tooting our own horn.
I like that. Comfortable being uncomfortable. It's true.
And you gave us a great example. You said I came there and it was $3 million and we grew it to $150 million. So I've got, and I think you can all probably tell a similar story. I've been part of a fast-growing organization with all of the issues that come along with that.
Exactly. I was going to compliment her for that as well, just saying how she'd grown at that company. So when Terry says, think about the numbers that you can mention in your introduction of yourself, and it's not a long introduction, it's 3 sentences, or it's a conversation with the guy who you will ask his what he does as well, instead of just blurting out everything about you. But as fascinating as it is. But if you just simply say what Scharrell said about your company, how you helped grow it, how you grew it, how you led the team, so that it's obvious you have business growth experience. So with that, I'd like to open for questions, and we are here to answer. Yes, I don't know names, forgive me, so let me just point rather rudely.
The mic is coming.
Mike is coming.
First of all, thank you for your efforts in passing the law. Fantastic. I've got 3 points, actually. So the real work begins once a law is passed on the implementation and the accountability in terms of women on boards. And the second piece is I've seen some pushback, obviously, with California corporations saying, you know what, we're not registered in California. That law doesn't apply because we're actually a Delaware company. So there's going to be, how are you kind of following through on this pushback? And third, does the law say that when these women are serving in these positions that they are voting members because positions of authority are important? And lastly, I'm a newly appointed commissioner to California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls.
Fantastic.
So however I can help in this effort, you let me know.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, excellent. Excellent and informed questions, and I'm delighted to share with you these important sound bites because Terry and I lived to tell about it. The last year, we had to live through 6 hearings in 2018, 3 in the Assembly, 3 in the Senate, and by the way, we had great support from NAWRB with letters from Desiree at every committee saying, this bill must be passed. And at every committee, the guys were looking, it was just like the Kavanaugh hearings. We were sitting down there in the witness table, and the guys were looking down at us saying, you women, there aren't enough women, qualified women, to serve on all the boards in California. So we gave numbers. We gave responses in a very cool and calm and not emotional way, and sharing education, how many women have been climbing the corporate ladder very successfully for the last 50 years and have never gotten past the into the C-suite or the boardroom doors. So we had numbers to be able to share with them, and we also had legal opinions. They said, we are going to sue you. This is the California Chamber of Commerce. We're going to sue you. We're going to take you to court, all the way to the Supreme Court. You women will never get away with this, because we don't want you to force our companies to put women on their boards. Of course, as we all know, the law always lags behind the need. Nothing is ever going to happen until they do. In fact, we had a resolution 5 years before, which we had to go through in order to do the steps toward a law that we never knew before we got involved in this. So the resolution was an urging of the companies to add women to their boards in the same numbers, and they didn't do anything. So then we had the groundwork for the law. And the California Manufacturers and Technology Association said this is unconstitutional, you will not get away with it, and we will fight you to the, they didn't say death, they said end. Well, how nice. We got the law. We have the law. It doesn't matter. And I'll tell you, since you're our girlfriends, the law only passed by 1 vote over a majority in each house. 1 tiny little vote. And and then on the last day, of course, and then the governor took a whole month to sign it. And the Kavanaugh hearings were going on when he finally signed it, and he sent a letter to the U.S. Judiciary Committee saying, this is what we do in California. So it was both Terry and I and other women involved, it just, you know, we were, and Desiree was so supportive, get a letter to the governor. Oh, when you pass a law, when you try to get a law done, you have to have hundreds of letters into every one of the committees and then into the Senate Speaker and the President, Senate President and the Speaker of the House. And it was a long, long, long haul. Anyway, we never thought we were going to get it passed. We never did, but we kept on going, no matter what. We kept on late night emails and writing letters, please support us, blah, blah, blah. So this is another great day that no one knows but a few of us. In March 21 of 2019, Bloomberg interviewed me and a lot of others, but interviewed the California Chamber and the California Manufacturing and Technology Association. They sheepishly said, no, we're not going to file a lawsuit. And that's because first of all, they didn't want to have the bad PR of appearing to be anti-women in this environment we now are in, thankfully, which I think was the driving reason. But the other reason was that with the legal opinions that we had from highly respected attorneys, law firms, one of them didn't want us to use their name because they didn't want their clients to know that they were on our side. But we had legal opinion that this was not unconstitutional. It did not fly in the face of the Equal Rights Protection Amendment because, they were saying it's unconstitutional to take a seat away from a man and give it to a woman. So we said, well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to require you to add a seat to the board. Add a woman. Don't take away a seat. So that got around that. And your last point, if they are incorporated anywhere, any other state, any other country, but their headquarters are here in California with their executive offices here filed with the SEC, this law pertains to them. And that's the majority of companies in California that are headquartered here, but incorporated in Delaware because they have no fees and very lax laws. So we had to get that squared away right at the beginning. But thank you for following this. Thanks for serving on that commission. Excellent commission for you to be on, and we know a lot of the women there, and they gave us support, of course. So it's a long story, and I'm sorry to go on, but I got to write a book about it someday. Right?
There's a dynamic that I also want to add, and I really commend you guys for getting that law passed, because, I mean, we were talking about that in Philadelphia. So, but one of the things that is, I think, a change as well is that the investors are also pushing this issue. So, and when you think about kind of how investing is done now, you have a lot of it concentrated at some large institutions. So, for instance, both BlackRock and State Street have been very vocal on this issue. And interestingly, after I was added to the Chimera board, Chimera got a letter that said, well, it's great that you've added one woman. You should really add some more diversity to your board. And so I think that, you know, if we can do this sort of two-track where there's a legal requirement and at the same time the investment community is recognizing these statistics that say, you know, companies perform better when they're women on the board, and typically you need at least 2, if not 3, on the board so that there is more of a voice. And so I just want to mention that dynamic, because I do think that when you add those two together, we'll see more. And you see it in the numbers. I mean, I get this email from something called Director Moves, and you can see the increases in the number of women that are being added to boards over the last year or so.
So, may we have another question?
Here.
Yes.
Thank you for pushing aside the curtain and have us a great view into what being a board member is. Amazing description of what it entails, how to. One thing I would like you to address is the time, because I often turn down invitation to serve on the board. My background is technology. I'm trying to build up my own startups now, so all of my focus is on hitting the ground running. So given you're either part of one board or more positions, how are you managing, what's the kind of time requirement being a board member takes? Because I know I'll get involved, even though it may not be my company, but I'm serving. The very fact that we are serving on it will become an intense project. So could you reflect on the time commitment?
How about both Terrys? What would you say, Terry Bayer first? Or, okay.
Just in terms of qualification and
The time commitment.
the time commitment. It varies. A smaller company has generally less of a time commitment. The bigger the company, the more complicated the business. In the day-to-day, I'll give you my own example. Our board meets 8 times a year, actually 9 months of the year. And we have to travel because it's up in Northern California. We get a board packet before that meeting. So I would estimate that I spend at least 8 to 10 hours reviewing the board packet and then traveling to the meeting. If you're chairing a committee, there's some additional responsibilities. It's critical that you do put the time in, and it has to be a priority because it's a lot of responsibility, particularly for a public company where there are shareholder commitments to be delivered. But in relation to the compensation, it's fair. So the compensation for the public company boards, depending on size, can be quite substantial. Many private companies also pay directors, and it's a decision really that you have to make in advance. You can always ask about the time commitment and make a decision if it's the time in your life when you want to take it on or not. The big time commitment comes when there's a crisis. And if you talk to people who are on the Target board at the time that they had a breach, or the Wells Fargo board, or these companies that go through, large companies that go through a crisis, you move in with your fellow directors and really must be responsible for the overall bottom line of that company and resolving its instances. So from my view, it's not a lot of time if you can carve it out. When I was working full-time, my CEO supported me and said, do it. We will benefit from you being on that board. And so I took paid time off and I did my board responsibility. Now I am no longer working full-time, and it really kind of opens it up.
Yeah, I think it's something you have to inquire about with each one. And to your point, the larger the operations are, the more scope that a company has, the more time it's going to take, and the more possibilities there are that you could have a problem that requires even more time. One of my boards meets in person 3 times a year. The materials are, but we also have phone calls to get ready for the corporate releases. So, and as a member of the audit committee, I have to read the SEC filings every quarter before they get filed. So that is not such a heavy lift, because at least the meetings in person aren't as voluminous. For my mutual funds board, we have 5 meetings. So it's 1 a quarter, but then one of the biggest responsibilities we have is the oversight and negotiation of the agreement with the investment manager, essentially. And that's a huge meeting with voluminous materials. Not that there aren't a lot of materials. So a lot of it is the reading and preparation. And as you go into a new industry, I've always been going to a lot of mortgage banking conferences. Now I find myself going to a combination of mutual funds conferences, because I had a lot to learn about that industry, but also ones around the National Association of Corporate Directors. I've gone to an advanced director professionalism course. I've gone to a future industry trends course and received my credentials from the NAACD. So so there are other things in my mind that you should be doing to make sure that you're furthering your education about what it means to be a director, to understand the types of issues that directors should be thinking about. And if you're in a new industry, that's going to take more time and effort for the learning curve around that. The Federal Home Loan Bank was closer to what you're talking about. We met every other month, so 6 times a year. But I was on 2 committees, so the reading was huge for the meeting, the 2 committees. So you really there's something you have to ask about, because each board will be different.
If I can add, because there are so many people in the room that are not on corporate boards, there's a stair step to move to being on a corporate board. And if you're interested in that, then you might want to start with a nonprofit board, because it at least gets you the experience to be able to sit around the table with other C-level executives and have strategic thought meetings. And then if you have the business skills, or you're a CPA, like myself, I run a CPA firm, so I've been on the executive committee, chairing the finance committee, chairing the strategic committees, and all of that dictates how much more time it's going to take. But it's a great entree to getting some board experience. And like both ladies have said, the amount of time can be based on how many committees you're on, and most of them meet about 9 months out of the year, and then committees add more. But that gives you the insight to what board experience looks like, and it gives you an opportunity to create the relationships that Betsy was talking about that you're able to leverage to the next step. But I would say that your win is dictated on your personal lifestyle. I started with nonprofit boards early in my career. I stopped when my children were very young, and then I started back. And now I'm at a stage where I'm looking to move more to a corporate board and start to reduce the amount of time that I'm spending on advisory boards or on nonprofit boards, because I'm an empty nester and I have the time as I prepare for my retirement to start to share some of the business skills that I have. So I think the timing just varies based on where you are in your career and your personal life.
Very important
Yeah,
points.
just to add to that, one of the things I found was when I first started getting involved in nonprofits, it was just something that was of interest to me. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't always do something that you're passionate about or interested in, but there's a difference between that and, as you start to get more involved, I would get more requests than I could ever do to, serve on nonprofit boards. You should also, as you think about navigating towards a corporate board, if that's what you want, look at who is on the board, right? So there was a big difference when I got on, I was on the Chamber of Commerce board, right? Or I was on the Performing Arts Center board. In fact, I just chaired that. Or I was on the public broadcasting station board. The level of people that are on those boards, they're also ones that you kind of have to network to get onto in the first place because they're looking for higher level people on those boards. But just think about that in terms of in your area, what boards that are nonprofit boards may help you meet people who could potentially be entrees to a for-profit board.
Absolutely, being strategic. And if you, because your heart tells you you want to be on a board that may not have really high-level people on the board, you can still consider that. Consider first what Terry's talking about, but then consider in addition your board that might be more of your heart rather than your strategic goal, because you can develop contacts by being on the finance committee, by reaching out to potential donors who are high-level C-suite executives, men as well as women, and then you build a relationship with those people from whom you're asking money. Now, a lot of women tell me, oh, Betsy, I don't want to serve on one more nonprofit board. It just costs me money, and I want to earn money. And of course, that makes perfect sense. However, you have to, like Scharrell said, use that pathway to become known and be on nonprofit boards. And doing that, in order to be noticed as somebody who gets things done, you have to be the one who's raising money. But I actually, and I let this go by, I'm really sorry because I never followed up and found out who it was, but I actually know of a woman who got on a very high-level corporate board because she was on a nonprofit board. It was cancer or heart-related. And she called a CEO, unsolicited and not knowing the guy, and made a pitch that was so impressive to him on the phone. I don't know how she got it. He said, we're looking for a woman on the board. I'd like to talk to you. And I mean, that was a total fluke. It's probably never going to happen again in the history of women. But it points out at that level. But all of you are good saleswomen, or you wouldn't be in this room. We're all good saleswomen, but you gotta practice your selling skills and decide whom you're going to sell to. But that's another avenue. Now, on the money, we'll just wrap this up. Yes, you get paid cash and stock. Most public companies are half and half, cash and half stock. But let's say on large cap, big public companies that all of us will never be on in the Fortune 500, the money's about $150,000 to $250,000, and in some cases, $500,000. We're never going to get there, us guys, us women. But we on the smaller ones, the amount earned can be $75,000 to $150,000. And on private company boards, it could be $50,000 or $60,000, which is a nice payment for your time and worth your time, especially if you like the company you want to grow. And Scharrell's point about stepping stones, once you get on that first one, it's generally smaller, then you parlay that into the next one and the next one. Oh, and another thing that the only executive search people know, that confidentially, in our reference calls and vetting of candidates, we call those nonprofit boards because the client who hires us to do a board search wants to know what that woman was like on her board. And if it's her first, if she hasn't been on a public before, then we're calling her large nonprofits. And they want us to find out if she fit into the culture very collegially, if she were disruptive. I hate to use that word because we know that disruptive means making change. And if she really is a good board member, good to get along with, and doesn't bring up, questions all the time just to be talking. Men are like that too. where they can be bad board members and they just bring up something and they like to hear themselves talk. So at any rate, money isn't everything serving on a corporate board. We've talked about all the other benefits, but I don't want you to think that all of us are going to get on a big, huge board because unless, the bluebird of happiness flies over and you happen to know somebody who knows somebody. But in California, most of the companies are not calling search firms, interestingly enough, this first year. They're mostly calling their CPA firms and their law firms to find out what women are their retired partners whom they could trust, and what women do they know in the community, the business community, that they would recommend. Because the companies still want to have people they can trust, and they don't necessarily want to call search firms thinking that they're going to end up with a stranger. But what they also do when they hire us to do a search is that a regular board search, is give us a list of 7 to 9 people, mostly men, and we advance the women, mostly men whom they know and trust. And most of the times, one of those people is going to get on the board. Now, if they happen to know a couple of women, and we vet those women, the women have a chance because of the law and the mood of the day. But the bottom line, and I say, all in good efforts, et cetera, people are starting board lists and lists of board candidates, strangers. They don't work. So don't bother getting your name on a list, et cetera, to be considered for a board, because they don't work, because of no board wants to have strangers on their board. Anyway, I think we'll leave you with that bottom line, and I want to give you a little commercial. In the 2020 Women on Boards, we'll have our big national conversation on board diversity in 32 cities throughout the country, also London, Madrid, Mexico City, and Hong Kong on November the 21st in Orange County. This is our Orange County one. I know that you'll be there because I'm going to twist your arm from now on.
That's with EMP, right?
Yes.
I'm
Well,
a
and
member.
Dita Shemke and the whole Orange County gang used to be part of our LA Orange County National Conversation event, but a lot of them didn't want to drive up. I don't know why. And so they're having their own, and it'll be very successful this year, and I know you'll be involved. And then in Los Angeles, it's at the Intercontinental Hotel on Friday, November 22nd. And in New York, it's Is that your birthday?
Great way to celebrate.
Fantastic. And then my new book, this is the previous book, the new one is coming out in mid-September, and it's called Winning the Board Game, and it profiles another 50 women or more, and it talks about how those women, the first one's about how to get on a board, this one is how the women already on boards have made the difference. So, with that, I want to thank my esteemed panelists. What fun, and I hope that we have really changed the course of careers of the women in this audience. And I know that you'll all be with us, and Terry's a faithful and loyal co-presenter of mine. I think this team, we should go on the road, don't you? I think we do. Right? It's all for love, Desiree, anything you'd like us to wrap up with?
Lunch is served outside at 12:30. Thank you very much. I think one of the things that I think we did address, I'd like to make a quick comment, is you're from Medicare and Medi-Cal, Terry. Yes. And here you're on California Water Service Board. Not everyone knows that covers 8 states of the water, of all the water that's used in those 8 states, and how powerful that is. We just talked about the panel before. So it's not always about being on the board. It's about the connections and what you get to get there, and then from there what you can do and change history.
Right. Yes.
Because the fact is water is so important. And right now we have the very first water lawsuit that's going on in the United States. So I wanted to say thank you very much for that.
Thank you,
Yes.
Desiree, because that's the other reason we want women on the boards, is companies will run better and do better things, and hopefully we are changing the course of history. Also, I have 3 books to give away. I'm going to give one to the California State Women's Commissioner here, and 2 others to the women of your number, who the first 2 who think you are very qualified and want to serve on a corporate board, so you will have this education, and the rest of you will have to buy it on Amazon. I'm sorry, but Desiree, this has been a pleasure. I'm sorry? Oh, I thought there was some...
No, we were laughing. I was like, I just got the first perk of the job.
Excellent. And what is your name?
My name is Erica
Erica Courtenay? Courtney. Great, Erica Courtney. We're going to watch you on the commission and things that you do. Thanks very much.
All
Erica.
right.
Bye-bye.